Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the East Riding of Yorkshire series. Together with the unparished city of Hull, it forms the county of the same name. There's 172 parishes here. Which one are we in today? Okay, today for you in the East Riding of Yorkshire, I've got one that's very similar to the last episode you would have seen in terms of how much land it covers from east to west. Where I am right now is the very, very, very eastern tip of the parish, and you might be able to see it's also a dead end. You cannot go any further than here because over there's a river, and that's the River Hull. We saw that as well in the last episode. This feels like the end of the world. Where I am right now is actually a little tiny hamlet called Aike, spelt A-I-K-E. It's a long, straight little hamlet slash village, and then there's a bend at the end of it which takes you back towards the main village in this parish, and that is Lockington. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like, and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Today we're in Lockington, or at least we will be in a few moments. To kick things off, we're in Aike, a small hamlet to the east on the banks of the River Hull. This is a long way from Lockington. Seasoned viewers will remember Ossendyke in Selby and how its name derives from oak trees. It's the same story here. Aike literally means oak. The locals sometimes pronounce it Yack. Last week we mentioned the Beverley and Barmston drain at Wilfholme. Here lies the answer as to why it was built. The land around Aike is too low-lying to drain by itself into the River Hull. As a result of that, the central cluster of houses in Aike used to be on a small island. That was until the drain was built in 1798, and since then Aike has been connected to the mainland. Between 1865 and 1935, Aike was its own civil parish. Previous to that, it was in the parish of Lockington, and then it reverted back to Lockington again in 1935. Aike has never had a chapel or a church. What it does have, though, is a railway line running alongside it, the same railway line which crosses Hutton Cranswick, Watton and Beswick parishes. Lockington Station used to be on the line here. The building still stands, but the station is long disused and it's now a house. It was opened in 1846 by the York and North Midland Railway, and it lasted until the June of 1960. Perhaps the best known thing about the line here, though, is the 1986 Lockington rail crash, a serious collision on the level crossing by the station, causing 8 deaths and several injuries. The level crossing was thought to be at fault, as there had been reports of the warning lights operating incorrectly, but an investigation concluded the van driver involved had been distracted, causing him to miss the lights. So now we're in Lockington, quite a distance away from Aike, and we begin our main walk at the primary school at the village's eastern end. This is a walk that will take in both Lockington and Thorpe. I'll explain the difference as we go around. This is Front Street, which runs along Lockington Village's northern edge. Lockington is termed a small village, but in truth this is the largest one you'll have seen since the Hutton Cranswick episode. It's smaller than Cranswick, but it's larger than Hutton in terms of area. It's situated approximately 6 miles northwest of Beverley, just off the A164 between Beverley and Driffield. 2001 census data shows there were 247 separate households here. However, since that census, brand new housing developments have occurred, and Lockington is ever growing, it seems. Despite that, it hasn't quite yet developed to the point where it can sustain its own shop. On Front Street we have a map of the place. This is an historic map, but in general terms Lockington still looks pretty similar to what you see here. Cop for some demographics next, people. Running through the village is a beck, and we'll see this numerous times. We're able to cross it several times too in 3 different ways, all on foot. Keep watching to find out how. The first way is via this bridge known as High Bridge, which is the easiest option. This will take us south towards the hamlet of Thorpe. You see, Lockington village is in fact 2 separate settlements. The north is known as Lockington, whilst the south is known as Thorpe. Usually, Thorpe denotes a smaller peripheral settlement, and correctly this should be known as Lockington Thorpe. Lockington has existed since Anglo-Saxon times. They were the first settlers here since the Romans had abandoned it. Considering the marshy nature of East Yorkshire at that time, that makes sense. In terms of elevation, the land here was the highest available for them, and so the village was born. The name Lockington even has Anglo-Saxon origins. The name literally means land or settlement belonging to the descendants of a man called Loker. The site of the current church, being the highest land in the village, was where they buried their dead. Okay, I've made a mistake here with my route because I wasn't supposed to come down here. I was supposed to turn down Church Lane, which is back up there. So I'm going to head back to where I was supposed to go, but I will come back past this later because my route was supposed to go down there and come around to this point and then head up there because that's a footpath. So let's go back. The Saxons were not the only group to have ever left their mark on the village. The Vikings were also involved here. Fun fact, the nearby village of Lund was Viking. Lund means grove in Danish. So let's go and see the church here next. To do that, we need the cool sanctity of Church Lane with its many overhanging trees. This is one of the oldest parts of Lockington village. St Mary's Church is a Grade 1 listed building. It was built with sandstone and brick in 1140 by the Normans. It was extended in the 16th century and there are Gothic windows built in 1350. There's a stained glass window which is based on the parable of the sower, found in Gospels by Matthew, Mark and Luke. The churchyard is also a Yorkshire Wildlife Trust sanctuary for wildlife. Lockington also had a castle to the south of the church. Earthworks and a moated site known as Coney Hill are all that remains now. It was built in around 1120 by the Fossard family. They were lords of the manor and they had been since 1071. The moated site was abandoned in the 17th century and its functions transferred to the present Hall Garth, which dates to 1685. God, the sun is really beating down at the moment. There isn't a cloud in that sky, you know. It is purely blue. It's beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it's really warm. I'm glad I've got the shade of these trees. Let's continue. Lockington has a Quaker history, most notably with the crew of the passenger ship Speedwell, which landed in America in 1656. Aboard that ship was one John Copeland, a Lockington resident. Local lore has it that Thorpe Lees, an area of Lockington, was the site of a Quaker burial ground. 1680 church records show that Francis Robinson, another Lockington Quaker, is buried here. So here we are back at the place I was mistakenly in earlier. Our route now goes along the rather ominously named Dead Lane, a footpath which ends a few yards away from the village hall. Dead Lane's name is believed to have originated from the Quakers, as the Quaker burial ground was supposedly located at one end of it. However, an 1854 OS map shows that to be false. The area was almost certainly the remains of Lockington's manor house. Interestingly too, Dead Lane retains its name, although it has in the past been known as Queen's Lane. This footpath passes some fields full of sheep and some cute little lambs too, who were all enjoying the late April sunshine. Okay, now at this point I've got a choice of route. I can either go down Chapel Street or I can carry straight on and go back to Front Street. I'm actually going to go that way because somewhere down there there's either a little road that links the two together or a footpath that links the two together. I think I might be able to see it actually. So if I go up here, I'll be able to catch both. At the end of Dead Lane, the Beck makes another appearance, and this is one of 2 fords that run across the road. The other we'll see in a moment. Still on the subject of street names, I found a brilliant online book about Lockington. In it, it refers to a stretch of the Beck running from Town Street to Dead Lane. Town Street is now known as Thorpe. The Beck has a little measuring stick in it recording the level of the water. In June of 1912, the Beck rose to a considerable height, high enough to completely surround the old school. The Beck is regularly cleansed by the Environment Agency to avoid flooding these days. The last time the Beck flooded was in 2007, but there's only a minimal risk of flooding here now. We pass a bench which was placed here for the millennium. There's a design we're used to seeing, usually across parts of Yorkshire. So next up, we're leaving Front Street again to go down Chapel Street via the Village Hall. To do so, we need to cross the Beck for a 3rd time, and this time I had a choice. Okay, so it turns out it's both. It's actually a road and a footpath that link the two together. There's the footpath in the form of a bridge over the stream, and here's the road in the form of another ford. Now, most people would choose to walk over the bridge, but this looks really shallow, so I'm actually going to attempt to walk through the ford. So it's just like walking through a big puddle. It's not very deep. As you can see, look, it's barely covering my shoes. It's cooled my feet down, if nothing else. There you go. The Village Hall is the old school. It replaced a wooden hut located in a field which was known as the Recreation Hut, which amongst other things was also used for billeting soldiers after Dunkirk. The Village Hall's full name is the Lockington Youth and Community Centre, and it was converted in 1972. The Recreation Hut would finish its life as the Social Hut at Beverley Westwood Hospital. After leaving a card on the notice board, we're off down Chapel Street next. Chapel Street is another which has changed its name. It used to be known as Back Street. Front Street's opposite. Water features are never far away from a pumping station or two. Chapel Street has 2 in fact. This is the first one almost directly opposite an old Methodist chapel. The second is near High Bridge. There were 2 chapels in Lockington. This was the Wesleyan Chapel, built in 1812 on land that was bought for 2 shillings. It's now a private residence. The Primitive Methodists also had a chapel located on Front Street. It was built in 1825 and then rebuilt close to the original site in 1860. Speaking of Front Street, it's back to it again for the last time. Okay, just a handful more things to catch here in Lockington, the first of which is this very nice old pump. We're seeing a lot of these in the East Riding around here. Here's Lockington's version. Once again, there's a village pump in a Wolds village. Who would have thought that, eh? This was vital for Lockington as the residents needed it for washing and for drinking. The phone box is next, and that houses Lockington's defibrillator. The phone box is lucky to have survived here, as in 2008 it was proposed to remove it. It was eventually bought from BT for just £1. I wonder if that's something that happens on a regular basis with the old red telephone boxes. Regardless, this route is almost complete, and it's an amble back up Front Street now to the school. That's not before we've had a look at this bus stop. Lockington used to have a service from the old Rockingham Inn public house, and that got me wondering about pubs. Okay, so my route will end walking back up Front Street to the school where I began. I'll tell you one thing that surprised me a little bit about a village this size. I expected there to be a pub here, but there isn't. I haven't spotted one, unless there's one out that way, which is where I'm going to be driving in a few moments to leave the East Riding behind for this little run of 10 that I've done. Anyway, you guys need a picture bit for this last instalment of those 10, and that's for Lockington, and it's coming right now. I can confirm there's no pub between where I was parked and where I am right now, which is at the western end of the village, and at the village sign, which you would have seen on the thumbnail. So yeah, we've traversed the parish of Lockington from Aike in the east to where we are now in the west, and the boundaries do go a little bit further, but as far as I can tell, it's just fields, farmland, countryside, which I'm about to drive through to leave this little section of the East Riding of Yorkshire behind. I've enjoyed these 2 days doing all 10 of these. Some interesting villages, some interesting places to look at, some nice landmarks, some really friendly people as well, which is always a help. And I'll be back at some point to film the next one here in this series, but for now, this has been the parish of Lockington, and I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.